Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. Today we're taking a look at an entry-level 1080p gaming monitor from AOC that continues their popular 24G line that we've recommended for some time now. Not everyone can afford the latest and greatest OLED technology, so it's always good to look at what is happening at the opposite end of the spectrum, which typically gets a lot more sales. So today we're testing the brand new AOC 24G4, the successor to the 24G2SP and 24G2. In some regions, this monitor is called the 24G4X, with AOC telling me the only difference between the G4 and G4X model is a different stand base. Regardless of what version you get, it's a 24-inch 1080p IPS panel with a maximum 180Hz refresh rate and all the usual gaming features like adaptive sync support and low input lag. There's also a 27-inch model available, the 27G4, which is largely similar. While we don't have a US price just yet, based on pricing in Australia and Europe, the 24G4 should be available for around $150 US, slightly cheaper than previous versions. The MSRP in Australia is $250, though promo pricing has it at a very attractive $200 right now, while in the UK you can expect to pay £150 and €190 in EU countries. For a budget monitor, I think the design of the 24G4 is okay. The materials used are pretty typical, matte plastic for the most part, and three of the bezels on the front are quite slim, the exception being the chin, which is a bit thick. The rear is basic, but I think looks quite good to be honest, and there's a red ring around the stand connection that adds a visual highlight. The stand is simple and doesn't occupy too much desk space. Where you can see the compromises in quality to hit a low price point is in the various seams around the design. If you look closely, they aren't the tightest seams and can be a bit uneven, but I don't think you'll really notice this most of the time. The panel is treated with the standard matte anti-glare coating, which is effective at reducing reflections in brighter usage environments. The stand has good ergonomic adjustability, and I think we're now beyond the stage where lower cost monitors feature crappy fixed stands. The 24G4 has height, tilt, swivel and pivot adjustment with a good range in all areas, and stability was quite impressive, though I guess it's easier to achieve with a relatively small and light display panel. Connectivity very basic here, offering just one DisplayPort 1.4, one HDMI 2.0 port and an audio jack. There's no USB ports at all, so no hub or firmware update functionality. However, both inputs support up to the maximum 180Hz refresh rate. Good to confirm that. The OSD is a bit difficult to navigate as AOC are using face buttons instead of a directional toggle, so it's a bit of a chore to change settings. This continues to be an annoyance with AOC's cheapest 1080p monitors, though to be honest there aren't a ton of interesting features in the OSD, just a typical range of color controls and a few gaming specific things like crosshairs. It looks the same as previous AOC monitors too, suggesting there have been few improvements to this area compared to prior models. For motion performance, the 24G4 comes with 4 overdrive settings, the first of which is off, the default setting when using the monitor for the first time. This shows native panel performance, which isn't overly impressive, though it's not that bad either, especially compared to budget VA panels, which have tons of dark smearing. Being an IPS display, dark smearing is a non-issue here. Weak overdrive improves performance slightly to a 9.6 millisecond average, though overshoot is virtually zero. Medium performance is the sweet spot for 180Hz gaming as speed improves to 5.9 milliseconds with only a small hit to overshoot, improving cumulative deviation to below 500. This is pretty good from a budget IPS, although closer transitions are a bit slower than expected. The fastest mode, Strong, has significant overshoot, which is very noticeable, so I wouldn't recommend that mode at all. For variable refresh rate gamers, the medium mode is pretty good when targeting the higher refresh rate range. So anything from 180Hz down to about 144 or 120Hz, medium is faster and overshoot isn't too noticeable. However, in the lower refresh rate range, so 100Hz, 60Hz and so on, inverse ghosting does become problematic and so is no longer the best mode for those refresh rates. If you're interested in playing games below 120 FPS, the weak mode is the ideal choice. While not especially fast, delivering about an 8 millisecond response time, there's no noticeable inverse ghosting, which is going to deliver fewer artifacts while gaming. This means the 24G4 does not feature a single overdrive mode experience. At high refresh rates, medium is best, and for low refresh rates, weak is best. If I was going to use a single mode for all variable refresh rate gaming, I'd choose weak, although it's a bit disappointing to miss out on that performance near 180Hz. Ideally, this monitor would have variable overdrive or perhaps the ability to fine-tune overdrive so users could split the middle between weak and medium. With that said, most budget 1080p monitors do not feature a single overdrive mode experience. The 24G2SP and Gigabyte G24F2 both didn't have this functionality, and neither did the original 24G2 model. So while it would be nice to see performance improve to the level of having a single overdrive mode experience, its omission isn't unusual. Compared to other monitors at their maximum refresh rate, the 24G4 performs well. This new variant is notably faster than the 24G2SP, with a 30% reduction in response times at a lower level of overshoot. It also has a slightly higher refresh rate at 180 versus 165Hz. Not a must-have difference, but it's certainly nice to see a small increase here. It also comes in slightly faster than the 24G2 2020 model, and much faster than the G24F2, which had poorly tuned overdrive settings. I haven't seen any monitors in this price and spec class that offer notably better performance at the max refresh. The downside to the 24G4 is needing to reduce the overdrive setting to weak for adaptive sync gaming, which is seen in this average performance chart. The options were either an 8.6 millisecond average with no overshoot, seen here, or a 5.2 millisecond average with a 31% inverse ghosting rate, a higher level of overshoot than most products in this chart. As such, it sits in the lower part of the chart, though it's better tuned than the G24F2 and offers a slower experience than the 24G2SP, but with less overshoot. The 24G2 from 2020 still appears to be one of the better tuned products, along with the Pixio PX248 Prime Advanced. To see where this balance of speed and overshoot lies, we have cumulative deviation. The 24G4 performs well, outperforming the 24G2SP with a 27% better result, and also coming in higher up the chart than the G24F2. It's not quite as well tuned as the 24G2 2020 model or a few of the Pixio products I've tested, which was also seen in the previous chart. The difference here is small though. The Prime Advanced has 13% better cumulative deviation on average. At 120Hz, there's nothing overly special about the 24G4. I chose to use the weak mode here as it has less visible inverse ghosting. At 60Hz though, this monitor is more a mid-tier performer, which is a pretty acceptable outcome and notably better than the 24G2SP. AOC do provide a backlight strobing setting with this display, although it requires you to disable adaptive sync to get it working. There is the ability to control strobe length with a lower MBR setting leading to more blur and a higher setting reducing brightness but increasing clarity. However, you won't see the feature working at 60Hz, and overall clarity is pretty mediocre even at the highest setting with noticeable strobe crosstalk. Given the limitations in image quality in most situations, I wouldn't use it. Input lag is great, with 0.8 milliseconds of processing delay, and due to a higher refresh rate, there's also a bit less refresh lag than 144Hz monitors. 180Hz is 25% faster than 144Hz, which probably isn't enough to be noticeable for most gamers, but again, it's a nice to have feature, and in this case, higher is better. In most cases, the only way to significantly improve responsiveness will be to move to a 240Hz or higher monitor, which naturally are much more expensive. Power consumption is excellent. This is a very efficient monitor, consuming just 15 watts, though this isn't notably better than its competitors and ends up pretty similar to previous AOC products. The Pixio PX248 Prime Advanced, which is generally faster in response times, consumes 47% more power, though in real wattage numbers it's just 7 watts more. Next up is color performance. The 24G4 is a wide gamut monitor, which you don't always get on budget products, with 93.4% DCI-P3 coverage, a fair result. In total, the display covers 75% of the Rec 2020 gamut, which is pretty good among similar gaming displays. Outside of the latest AOC products, most other 1080p monitors in this class featured sRGB-only gamuts, so this continues to give the 24G4 an advantage. Out-of-the-box performance was pretty good for grayscale. AOC have largely nailed the gamma here, and the color temperature only had a slight blue tint. This led to very good Delta E performance. A Delta E ITP below 5 is great for gaming monitors, especially from the factory. Saturation and color checker performance is impacted by the wide gamut though, as there's no sRGB clamp enabled by default, so there is some oversaturation present. Compared to other monitors, the 24G4 has excellent factory grayscale performance, coming better calibrated than the 24G2SP. Color checker performance is good as well, especially considering the wide gamut, although it isn't substantially better than many other products. AOC do offer an sRGB mode, though like a lot of products, it locks many settings when you enable it, such as white balance controls. Despite this, the mode is a great way to reduce oversaturation and get sRGB gamut emulation. Grayscale performance is very strong and the clamping functionality is very effective, reducing saturation delta E's to below 5 and color checker to just a 3.16 ITP average. Really happy with the results here. Compared to other monitors, sRGB mode performance is right there among the best for grayscale, a notable step up from the 24G2SP and 24G2. Color checker performance is excellent as well, delivering an experience on par with high-end monitors in terms of factory calibration in this mode. This seems to be an area that AOC have placed a lot of focus on. The Q27G3 XMN that I recently reviewed also had a great sRGB mode. Accuracy can be improved through a full calibration with Portrait Display's CalMan software. I achieved strong results for sRGB content as the monitor, well, it already comes pretty well calibrated from the factory. For P3 work, we are missing the top end of the gamut, so it's not the best suited product if you need full coverage of that gamut, but for casual users, you will benefit from the increased gamut and higher potential for saturation. Maximum brightness is a bit underwhelming. The 24G4 is only capable of 325 nits, admittedly higher than the 24G2 from 2020, but not an overly impressive result. Still, I think this level of brightness will be sufficient for most users. Minimum brightness is good at 44 nits. I was reasonably happy with the 24G4's native contrast ratio, which is good from an IPS panel at 1318:1. This isn't all that different from some other 1080p monitors like the 24G2SP or G24F2, but it's good to confirm we aren't getting a sub 1000 result like the worst IPS products. However, in general, contrast, it's not very good as black levels aren't especially deep on an IPS LCD. The contrast ratio is well below what you'd see from a typical VA, and there's no local dimming functionality to improve the contrast beyond what is seen here. Viewing angles are acceptable and reasonably wide, though not at the level of the highest end LCDs. Still, it's a good experience relative to similar VA and especially TN LCDs. Uniformity was average to mediocre on this panel, which is very much as expected in terms of results in this sort of price class. Final section of this review is the new Hub Essentials Checklist 2.0. In this first part, we're looking at how AOC advertises the monitor and whether this is accurate. For the most part, AOC does a good job of advertising, however, there are a few contentious aspects. HDR is not a key feature on their product page, but support is listed. However, outside of accepting HDR signal inputs, there is no real hardware here to support HDR, no local dimming, nothing to enhance the contrast, and brightness is low. DCI P3 gamut coverage is also lower than advertised, and 1 millisecond response times are a bit misleading. The second part of the checklist looks at feature support and performance standards across many key areas. As a budget monitor, there are lots of features and performance characteristics this product doesn't have, such as good HDR performance, elite backlight strobing, or more simple stuff like USB ports, and at this price tier, that's generally okay. On the other hand, AOC nails the basics. I didn't experience any flickering or pixel inversion in my testing, all key features work together, and input lag is low. All up, the AOC 24G4 is a pretty decent entry-level 1080p gaming monitor that improves upon its predecessor in notable areas. There hasn't been a ton of innovation in the sub $200 space over the last few years, but with each generation these monitors seem to get slightly better and slightly cheaper, which is definitely the case with the 24G4. Relative to its predecessor, the 24G2SP, the new 24G4 model delivers faster and better tuned response times at a higher 180Hz refresh rate. Overall motion performance isn't anything special and it still lacks a single overdrive mode experience, but it's a step above what AOC offered before and ends up delivering good enough speed for gaming. Input lag is low and I didn't experience flickering during my time using it. AOC retains one of the key strengths to prior products in that the 24G4 is still a wide gamut monitor with 93% coverage of P3, and it complements this with excellent factory calibration and a great functional sRGB mode. This ends up creating a nice overall package that delivers a strong balance of motion performance and color quality. It's common in this price range for one of those aspects to be neglected, but that doesn't appear to be the case here. While there are some negatives to this monitor, the lack of a directional OSD control, basic set of inputs, mediocre brightness and so on, there's nothing here that's a complete deal breaker. Take brightness and contrast for example, neither are especially great, but the results are fine for everyday gamers. Performance could be better tuned, but you're not getting excessive overshoot or dark level smearing. At a price point of around $150 US, I think the 24G4 will continue AOC's position of having the go-to budget 1080p gaming monitor. It's clearly better than the slightly more expensive 24G2SP in my opinion, and also outperformed the G24F2 that I looked at last year. You could go for something like a Pixio PX248 Prime Advanced that costs just $120 these days, and for that price you do get better response times, but you won't get the same level of color accuracy, wide gamut support, refresh rate, or even basic stuff like a height adjustable stand. With all that in mind, I think the 24G4 or 24G4X in some regions is easy to recommend, especially if you can find it for around that $150 price. In Australia, I think it's an especially good deal at $200 right now. The closer it gets to $200 US in other regions, and especially the United States, the less attractive it would become as it starts to encroach on the territory of 1440p monitors, and pricing for AOC products can fluctuate from month to month. But if they can keep it near $150 US, it'll be a great buy for budget gamers. Anyway, that's it for this review of the AOC 24G4. If you want to support Monitors Unboxed, Hardware Unboxed, and all the testing that we do across our various channels, we do have our Patreon and Floatplane accounts. Links are in the description below. Down there, if you click through and you sign up, you'll be supporting the channel, which is always great, but you also get some cool benefits and perks in the process. ICC profiles, we generate those for these reviews. BTS videos, monthly live streams. We've got a Discord chat where you can chat about monitors, get advice, all that sort of thing. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.